Hey, how's it going? In today's video, we're going over Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 13. The title this time around is called Prescience, which when defined in the English dictionary means the idea of knowing something before it actually takes place. Basically, it's foreknowledge. This chapter was highly informative and almost on par with Boruto Chapter 75 of Part 1, as it forever changes the way we view this series. And I really appreciate this chapter because it proved I was right on a few things when it came to my theory videos, which is always exciting. The cover this time around is okay. I think it's more symbolic of how we as fans have perceived Boruto constantly moving in action these past 12 chapters, and now we have more context for why he's acting the way he's been acting. Okay, so let's dive right into the review. So we open up the chapter with Jura observing the events that transpired after his attack on Boruto. From the last chapter, Jura stated he wanted Boruto dead because Boruto was actually a genuine threat to his goals. And now Jura wants to use Kawaki as the Otsutsuki sacrifice. Jura then proceeds to close his right eye and charge up another Bijou Bomb. Despite knowing Himawari is in the area, I find it interesting that he's willing to sacrifice the Nine-Tails chakra just to kill Boruto. Despite being a monster, he is prioritizing self-preservation over a desire, which is something very associated with humans. Before Jura prepares the next attack, Shinju Bug appears from the claw mark area of Jura's body. We then get to learn that he has also received an original name just like the other three Shinju, his name being Mamushi. I was wondering what the other two Shinju have been up to at this point since they were absent for so many chapters. Jura proceeds to ask Mamushi what he wants, and Mamushi then explains that Matsuri conducted an investigation and found out that Boruto was not working alone. How Matsuri came to this conclusion is strange, but I'm going to roll with it. She likely has some type of unique ability since she was also able to sense the pain of Konohamaru and Team 10 in Chapter 5 when Moegi was essentially eaten and became a tree. Despite not physically being around them, she was still able to perceive their emotions. Jura, before responding, takes one final look at Boruto. In this moment, he is deciding whether to finish Boruto off or not, and that's very important for later. I'm going to get into why that's very important. I'd like to think that what Jura was essentially thinking about internally was that he needs to find the person who essentially gave Boruto this information. Boruto is a threat, yes, but the bigger threat is the person who is essentially helping him. Killing Boruto right now would actually be foolish because Boruto would be the key to finding out who is the person who knows so much about the Shinju. Mamushi then looks at the Thorn Soul bulb and determines that Hidari was defeated in battle. Jura realizes that the real threat, who we know is Kashin Koji, is a deadly foe because if he knew about the Thorn Soul bulb, who knows what else he knows? Jura decides to retreat and restore Hidari before his soul bulb essentially rots. We can infer that if the bulb did rot, Hidari can't be reborn and Sasuke would essentially be freed at that point. Jura considers Boruto lucky. He doesn't want to lose an ally in Hidari, and he also wants to know who Boruto is working with, so Jura decides to take his leave. Jura feels as though that the heavens themselves are decreeing that Boruto essentially remains alive, which is interesting because we know that Shibai's powers are what's constantly changing reality for people in this series. As Boruto starts to awaken in the present, we are then brought back 2.5 years earlier in his past. This of course being after Sasuke's final stand against Code. Considering Boruto is all alone and he clearly has Sasuke's sword in one of the panels. Boruto was in a situation where he was completely isolated and surrounded by several shinobi who, of course, were hunting him down. I can't help but feel bad for him here. Boruto is being hunted for something he didn't do. He knows he's also being hunted by Code at this time, and he recently lost his master. When all hope seemed lost and Boruto's back was against the wall, however, he hears a voice. Koji tells Boruto he's finally found him. Koji then informs Boruto that he's not a foe and says he needs to come with him right away. Boruto doesn't trust Koji, but he has little options at this point. Koji teases Boruto if he's scared of toads. Koji then reverse summons Boruto to a familiar looking area. Boruto proceeds to ask Koji where are they, and Koji explains to Boruto that they are near the Land of Wind, specifically at one of Orochimaru's abandoned bases. Koji knowing about the base makes sense. Orochimaru back in Naruto Part 1 wanted to use the hidden sand as a weapon against the hidden leaf village. He killed and impersonated the 4th Kazekage to make it happen. Jiraiya would often search for Orochimaru's trail, so it's not impossible that he would have stumbled upon a few of Orochimaru's former hideouts. If we follow the same logic about Delta having Akabe's memories in Boruto chapter 75, then aside from personality and soul, Koji also having this intel would make sense courtesy of Jiraiya's memories. We also learned that Koji's ninja toads are not actually living toads at all. Rather, they are scientific ninja tools that extend Koji's capabilities in battle. He can talk through them and use an ability to see through the toads as well. And this is kind of reminiscent of Nagato and his 6 paths of pain back in Naruto Shippuden. Boruto doesn't appear to recognize Koji at all and asks him essentially, who is he? It sort of makes sense that Boruto wouldn't remember him right away. It was likely 2 years ago since they last encountered each other, and they only had one brief interaction with so many events happening after that. Koji proceeds to pick up his broken mask and reintroduces himself to Boruto. Boruto's memories are instantly triggered, and since his first experience with Koji wasn't pleasant, Koji has to take it a step further and explain that he's an artificial being that was created by Amato. This was a method to essentially gain a little of Boruto's trust by giving that description of himself. Boruto reacts in an essentially normal manner to someone who's been under those specific circumstances with Koji. Hey, aren't you that guy that killed Ao? Although Boruto and Ao were enemies back in Part 1, they did gain mutual respect for each other as shinobi. Ao even gave his life to protect Boruto when Koji first made his entrance. Boruto also remembers that Koji was the one who attempted to kill Konohamaru, someone Boruto viewed as a big brother. The way Koji looks at Boruto's reaction, you could almost tell that Boruto had confirmed a few things for him. Koji then asks Boruto, has Boruto been Boruto Uzumaki up until the day he was born? Which confirms that Kashin Koji was indeed infected by omnipotence, which of course the whole planet was, so this isn't a huge shock or anything. But despite that, Boruto is shocked that Koji is suspicious of the idea of reality being tampered with at all. Boruto even asks Koji if he knows about omnipotence, and Koji then goes on to explain his perception to Boruto. Boruto in Koji's mind is Isshiki Otsutsuki's vessel, and Koji remembers that he and Amato helped him escape from the clutches of Kara. Koji admits he doesn't know a lot about omnipotence itself, but appreciates having more context for why Boruto was chased out of the village. He also understands that Boruto and Kawaki's lives were flipped, without Boruto necessarily having to explain that to him. Boruto then asks how could he accept the concept so easily when everyone else in his life could not. And this is where the title prescience comes into play. Koji explains he can accept the concept of omnipotence because he knew about it before it even happened. And not only did he know about it, but that he also knew about the possibility of it happening being very high. This is a quick moment, but I like it because we get some insight on Kashin Koji's motivations for helping Boruto. After he explains everything to Boruto, we get a glimpse into Kashin Koji's humanity. I think during his time in isolation, which was also time away from Amato, he had the opportunity to think as his own individual. The way Kashin Koji holds on to his broken mask, it shows a sense of regret. A regret for viewing himself only as a tool to carry out orders, no matter the cost. Jigen was his enemy, but Jigen had a point. Kashin Koji was just a tool for Amato at the time, no free will of his own. Kashin Koji was Amato's knight, and because Amato was already winning the game of chess, he was willing to sacrifice Koji because he had already won. Koji then goes on to say he owes Boruto an apology for attacking him and his friends back then. He just wanted to stop Isshiki, but that didn't make his methods for doing so necessarily right. I think their interaction honestly shows the growth of both characters. Koji is free of Amato, and he can choose his own path and do right in the world because he wants to, not because he is a tool to be used by another person. Boruto forgiving Koji also shows his journey as a character. He understands Koji now more than ever because of him being a rogue shinobi and likely causing him to make a lot of hard decisions along the way. Boruto also understands what it's like to hold on to guilt because Boruto still blames himself for what happened to Sasuke at this point in the timeline. And I believe this was long overdue, but we get to see some perspective on what Kashin Koji was thinking during his fight with Isshiki. He holds no ill will towards Amato, despite Amato withholding the fact that Koji could have beaten a weakened Jigen, but not Isshiki himself. Koji essentially accepted his fate. He was content on dying because he knew that he had successfully completed the task he was created for, to kill Jigen. Koji also knew Isshiki had a time limit, so his days were numbered anyway, so long as he failed to implant another karma seal on Kawaki. And Koji fully intended to leave the rest to the 7th Hokage, which interestingly enough was something that Jiraiya also did when he lost the pain. He entrusted everything to Naruto. Despite how things looked in chapter 48 of part 1, however, Koji's reasons for escaping from Isshiki were far beyond just self-preservation. Koji saw the future. Despite not being in the rest of part 1, he actually saw everything that unfolded and beyond even that. He knew that even if Isshiki died by Kawaki's hand, the earth would not be safe. Koji would have died for nothing at that point. Koji witnessed the same events that we essentially did. He saw Baryon Mode Naruto. He saw Code's future actions. He saw Boruto Shiki awakening. He saw Kawaki's betrayal. He saw Ada. And he saw many other things. Interestingly enough, Koji actually witnessed the birth of 5 Shinju. But events, of course, did not play out like this. Shinki, Gaara's adopted son, never had a Shinju counterpart appear in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 4, which was essentially their first debut, and they confronted Boruto and Code respectively. So Koji likely viewed an even darker timeline than the one we are witnessing now, which is crazy to think about, where there's 5 Shinju right off the bat. Koji reached the revelation, so long as the Ten Tails was alive, that these negative outcomes would keep occurring in these potential futures. So Koji went on for the next year and a half studying his ability. He then went on to compare what has happened in the parallel realities to what is currently happening right in front of him in present day. I can't imagine the mental torture such an ability could cause. Seeing things that are so real, but in reality they are nothing more than empty possibilities that may or may not even happen. Koji then re-explains what Amato had told Naruto and the others back in chapter 75 of part 1, that Amato implanted Shibai Otsutsuki's DNA in all of the Kara inners, and that all of their abilities are derived from Shibai's own abilities. And Koji also explains that Shibai's abilities were able to successfully manifest in Ada, Damon, and Cold. Boro, Delta, and Koji up until the events of chapter 48 of part 1 did not show any signs of being able to use Shinjutsu. Given the circumstances, however, I do believe Delta still has the potential to awaken a Shinjutsu. If Koji discovered this latent ability right when he was at the point of getting ready to die, why not her? Koji then goes on to call the ability to see all potential futures prescience. And he explains something that I have explained in a few theory videos on this channel, that the Boruto timeline is in a great limbo. I also believe Momoshiki has the ability to use prescience as well, and is connected specifically to his Byakugan. The timeline in Boruto is not simply a straight path, and that's a metaphorical battle between different destinies. Koji explains that he actually saw a reality where Naruto died against Isshiki. Judging by Naruto's position, this had to have been after he used Baryon mode. Isshiki, like in the real timeline, pulled Kawaki into Momoshiki's dimension. But here's the difference. There was a branch decision that occurred. Isshiki had two options: torture Naruto to get Kawaki to surrender, or mentally break Kawaki by killing Naruto, and with Naruto's death, it would kill any hope of Kawaki being anything more than a vessel. So he has no will to carry on. So Isshiki automatically wins at that point. Koji then explains that Kawaki's body was used to resurrect Isshiki, essentially, and Boruto was the sacrifice for the Ten Tails in this potential future. Boruto is shocked that Koji even knew about all of this, since after all, Naruto, Sasuke, Isshiki, and himself were the only ones in Momoshiki's dimensions at the time. Koji talks about another possible reality that could have taken place. This time, it's the deaths of Boruto and Sarada at the hands of Kawaki. Once again, this possibility came down to a branch decision. This time by Boruto. Boruto had a choice: either trust Sarada to dodge Kawaki's attack or push her out of the way, which essentially is what he did in the actual story. In this timeline, Boruto didn't do this. Sarada is killed, and Boruto, likely being distraught, was killed by Kawaki as well, meaning omnipotence didn't occur in this future, and ultimately, with Boruto dead, Code successfully sacrificed Kawaki to the Ten Tails, and once again, the world ended. I'll even take what Kashin Koji is saying a step further, that the manga's continuity is also its own unique timeline, its own unique possibility, and that time truly is affected by the decisions of the characters. Toneri intervening with the timeline is why the anime's continuity is different from the manga. I'm going to leave a link in the description for that video. Boruto is reluctant, but he does come around to what Koji was essentially saying, because Koji knew about events that he wasn't even there for. He had enough evidence to back up his story. And Boruto asks a valid question to Koji at this point. If history is going to play out in a specific way, regardless of how we get to that point, why even bother? And then Koji says something I think is really cool. He says that the best advantage in this situation is intel. When you know something is going to happen a specific way, you already have changed events, because you're not going to act the same way you would have if you didn't know what was going to happen. Koji is referring to the butterfly effect. Every action, no matter how big or small, will ultimately affect the world around them. Koji also presents a major benefit of knowing about infinite realities. He can teach Boruto about techniques that Boruto himself learned in all of these different possible futures. Infinite futures means infinite possibilities. This explains Boruto's major jump in power, because he has adopted techniques that would have taken him years to master. Boruto learned the flying Raijin and Uzuhiko because they were originally mastered by alternate timeline versions of himself. Koji likely saw a future where Boruto didn't switch places with Kawaki and wasn't exiled from the village, and somehow Boruto was able to learn the flying Raijin in this timeline, perhaps from a ninja scroll or through Genma and the other Leaf Shinobi that used the technique in Shippuden. The Uzuhiko could have been from a timeline where Kashin Koji could have trained Boruto earlier, and through ingenuity learned his techniques after a few years. And Wind Style Breakthrough, which was essentially a technique that Boruto used in the last chapter, could have been from a timeline where Orochimaru was the one who trained Boruto. Koji then tells Boruto about Jura 2 years before his creation, and that Jura would be the one to kill Boruto. So Boruto was actually supposed to die in this chapter, and Jura fully intended to do so. Kawaki is weak, and Boruto knew too much, so it only made sense. What changed the timeline, in my opinion, was the Rasengan Uzuhiko. This is a technique that Boruto should not know in this current timeline, but he does. Had Hidari not been destroyed by it, Mamushi wouldn't have suggested in this chapter to Jura to hurry back, and due to Koji's interference in Boruto's destiny, Jura wants to keep Boruto alive in order to find out answers. Boruto surviving also means that the future has changed, and therefore there is still hope. Koji then explains that the very worst future can occur if and only if Code loses control of the Claw Grime, which of course was what happened. Koji explained in nearly all futures he saw that the Divine Tree people essentially emerged. So, if something in most futures occurs, it's bound to happen regardless, which explains why Boruto and Koji didn't freak out when the Shinju appeared in chapter 4. Koji even explains how to save Sasuke from the tree. I'm sure it relates to bringing the Thorn Soul bulb to the tree in order to unseal him. Otherwise, Boruto would have just destroyed it on the spot. This also explains why in Blue Vortex chapter 2 that Boruto was trying to warn Code to work with him and not against him. Boruto knew that if Code lost control in most timelines, then at least he can convince him here to walk a different path, which will alter the future. Koji then tells Boruto that one thing is for certain. In most of the timelines, Kawaki is the one who gets devoured and the planet essentially dies. And to be honest, Kawaki deserves this ending, but not at the cost of everyone else. The logical thing to do after the Shinju were created would be to deal with Kawaki. Kawaki was willing to die anyway so long as Naruto lived in a world that was free from the Otsutsuki. So why not? This would also drastically change the timeline if Kawaki was dead. But Boruto says he's not willing to go through with killing Kawaki. Similar to chapter 80, he thinks his issues with Kawaki can be resolved peacefully. And judging by the first scene of the series, this is a horrible mistake. Boruto puts on his headband, which symbolizes his resolve. He is going to defeat Code and the Ten Tails in his mind. While I appreciate Boruto's optimism, and while he did manage to defeat Code, he hasn't done anything about the Ten Tails yet. I think he's a little bit in over his head, if I'm being honest. We jump back to present day, and we get to see that Boruto awakens to see Sumire by his side. Konohamaru checks Sarada's wounds and sees that her arm is virtually useless and that essentially the nerve was damaged. Sarada then tells Konohamaru to look after Boruto. He should be confused on why Sumire and Sarada are so intent on helping the killer of the 7th Hokage, but he questions nothing. I still feel as though a part of him senses the bond he used to have with Boruto. And then Himawari proceeds to wake up in Nishi's arms and rushes over to help the injured Sarada. Just like in chapter 11, Himawari proceeds to heal her friend's wounds. I still think it's strange she can do this. Kurama can heal Jinchuriki's wounds, but not someone else's wounds. This has never been seen in the original series. Naruto could not restore other people's wounds with Kurama's power. Naruto could only heal himself with Kurama's abilities. He needed Hagoromo's Sun Pattern Seal to pull off the creation of all things technique, which essentially healed Might Guy and Kakashi. I believe this is a combination of both Kurama's chakra and Six Path chakra that she essentially inherited from her parents, and this is what's causing this occurrence to happen. Himawari is shocked by Boruto being present, and Kawaki tells her not to rush over to heal him, rather to put restraints on Boruto first, and then heal him. Kawaki is really annoying, and he's only keeping Boruto alive because he wants answers. Then he's probably going to do something stupid to the only guy on the planet who could actually stand up against the Shinju. Konohamaru puts some chakra restraint handcuffs on Boruto, and now he can't use the flying Raijin jutsu to escape. So for the first time in 3 years, Boruto gets arrested. Kawaki unfortunately finds Kashin Koji's steam toad and destroys it, so now Kashin Koji can no longer reverse summon Boruto to his location. I can see Koji going to the village to bust Boruto out of prison later though. I'm not worried about Boruto at all. I mean, there's been multiple eyewitnesses catching him helping the village against Code, the Claw Grime, and now the Shinju. He also has the 8th Hokage, Ino, Sarada, and Sumire by his side. I also feel like Kurama is going to tell Himawari that Boruto is her real brother, and Amato could always confirm Boruto and Kawaki have switched lives by using Kawaki's shutdown command on Boruto. We cut back to the location of the Divine Tree as we see Jura returns to restore Hidari using the Thorn Soul Bulb. I'm honestly annoyed he's back. He's not particularly interesting as a character, and it just raises the stakes for just rescuing Sasuke. If you notice though, the white smoke appeared when Hidari manifested, similar to Kashin Koji's vision of the potential future where he saw that 5 Shinju manifested at the same time. So we find out that essentially the Divine Tree shoots out Thorn Soul bulbs, and that those are the things that essentially create the Shinju. So when that bulb dies, so do they. Matsuri, in addition to investigating Boruto's partner, has also been working around the clock to produce a 5th Thorn Soul bulb. So yes, next chapter we'll likely see the 5th Shinju. I don't think it's going to be Gaara's son, Shinki, and here's why. For one, that was simply a possible future. Shinki may not have even gotten eaten in this current timeline. 2, if it is Shinki, why hide the reveal? It will just be so obvious. I think it will be a familiar face of someone we've seen before. It's only a matter of who. It would be crazy if it was Kakashi or one of the Kage, maybe Gaara. I guess we'll find out next chapter.